Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming, the drums rum-tumming everywhere, so prepare.
Welcome, my friends, to the July TV show. As always, the show is designed to allow people who've never had the honor of serving, and also our vets, to understand what our military goes through and some of the experiences that they encounter. It's also to remind the vets that you served with honor, you should be proud of what you did, and America needs you, and they respect you. The Purple Heart is the oldest decoration in our military's history. It was originally known as the Badge of Merit. It was established by George Washington on August 7th, 1782. At that time, there was no decoration for common soldiers. General Washington felt that there should be a decoration awarded for valor and meritorious service. The award was a Purple Heart to be worn on the left breast. That medal was forgotten for 150 years, till General Douglas MacArthur issued a general order renaming it the Purple Heart. The medal is given when a wound is received in action with the enemy of the United States. It was only an Army medal until 1942, when President Franklin Roosevelt authorized the Navy to award the medal to Navy personnel and Marines and the Coast Guard. A service member who was given this medal was either wounded or killed in action. They have shed their blood for you. Truly, we need to honor these who have earned the symbol of how much they are willing to give for you and for our country. Unfortunately, my guest on this show has had health issues and cannot attend at this time. And thinking about what I'm trying to achieve with this show and letting you understand more about military life, I thought, what would I give the people who have never had the honor of serving and veterans to remember what it was like to be in the military life? So I thought, why not talk to you about my experience in being inducted into the Army? It was a cold day, March 13th in 1967. Got on a bus in Gary, Indiana at the post office. There's a bunch of young men like me, 18 to about 32. We were on our way to Chicago. It was very quiet there. We all realized we may be going into the military, and there was a war going on in Vietnam. We got to the induction center in Chicago and went through a series of examinations and tests. And I had experience there that made me somewhat skeptical of our Army doctors. The doctor came up in front of me, put on his little patch up there, looked at my eyes, sat back, and yelled at the other doctor, "This man has a two-colored cornea." The other doctor looked at him and said, "Is he breathing?" And the doctor said, "Yes." And he said, "Take him." So needless to say, I entered the military service. We were sitting in a small room after that, waiting to see what was going to happen. And an officer came in and told us to follow him. We did, and we were told to take the oath of allegiance. We were also told if we refused the oath, there would be dire consequences. We raised our right hands and we took this oath. I, James Kruse, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me according to the regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God. This oath has no end date. For those of us who received it, we still follow it. It still means something to us. So we got out of the induction center. We're all a little scared. And they put us on a bus. We found out we were going to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which is quite a distance away. A few of us tried to get to know other people, but for the most part, it was a very quiet ride. We were all thinking about what we're going to be going through now, what it's going to be like. We had people in the bus from Chicago, Northwest Indiana, all races, all religions, all colors. You know what? One thing I found out in the Army is the only color you know is OD. That's olive drab, which is the uniforms that we wear for fatigues. It was a long ride, and we were going to another world. When we arrived at Fort Knox, we got there at night. We had a couple of drill sergeants came on the bus, and they shuffled us off. And believe me, they used some language that some of us never ever heard before, and some of us heard a lot of, and which we heard a lot more of during the rest of our time in the military. We got off, we were greeted. We were told basically how inept we were and how wasted our life was, but the Army was going to take care of us, and we were going to be soldiers. We went into these old Army barracks, probably built just before World War II. They were all of wood, and this is where we were going to stay the night. So we learned about two different things. One of them was the butt cans. Now, those don't mean your derriere. These were cans of coffee cans filled with water where men put their cigarette butts out. And believe me, I didn't smoke, and I hated the smell of those things. But it was the Army. And also, we had fire watch. In those old buildings, they had diesel stoves that when you lit them and they heated up, they turned red. So you had to watch for fire watch. So you pulled an hour of it. You had a helmet liner on your head, and you were walking both floors, and then when you got done with your hour, you had to go over to somebody who was sleeping and wake them up and tell them, it's your turn. And not everybody took that so well. Most of us didn't get a lot of sleep that night. We were kind of worried about what was going to happen. We woke up at 5 o'clock the next day, our first day in the Army, and we were told to go outside and get into a formation. And we met our drill instructors at that time. Every soldier, every sailor, every Marine, every airman, every Coast Guardsman remembers his drill sergeant's name. Mine was Sergeant Red, and his corporal was Corporal Boone. And we got to know them very intimately. And of course, they got into our face and told us, how lucky we were to be in the Army. And they told us how, no matter how bad we were now, that we were going to take care of them. It was an interesting conversation because they were right there in front of our faces, and they did speak rather loudly. After the formation, they sent us to chow, went to the mess hall, we ate our meal, and then they got us out, and they put us in another formation, and they began teaching us how to march. And the first place they marched us to was the barber shop. Well, there's only one style of barber in the Army, and that's cut it all off. And it was funny because just before I got into the chair, there was a young man next to me, long blonde hair, and they were going through and they were cutting it, and there were tears coming down from his eyes. It wasn't exactly the thing you wanted to do when you're first starting in the Army. After that, they took us to another tent. And they gave us a card. It was called a shot card. Nobody lost their shot card, because if you lost it, you had to take all your shots over again. So we got in the line, we walked in, and there were medics on both sides of us, and each one was sticking us with a needle. Now, the first shot that I got, I'm okay. The guy in front of me, first shot he got, he went down. Experiences like that you never forget the rest of your lives. They were constantly yelling at us and breaking us down verbally. But we understood, I don't say at that time, but we understand later and now, that what they were doing was taking us out of our civilian mode and making us soldiers, teaching us that you have to understand when somebody talks to you, it's important. It could mean your life. The next place we went, we had a double time there. When you double time, that means you're marching at a slow trot. Well, not so slow sometimes. And we learned a military axiom: hurry up and wait, because we got there and they weren't there. So we had to wait for them to open up the doors. You walk in, and the first thing they give you is a duffel bag. And then they start giving you everything you're going to wear. Your fatigue clothes, your fatigue jacket, your military uniform, your shirt and your uniform, your tie, the belt that fits everybody, your shoes. You wear a single pair of shoes and 2 pair of boots. After that, they marched us to our new barracks, which were very nice. They were 2-story modern barracks. And the first thing we had to do was go down to the quartermaster, who's in charge of supplies, and we had to get our bedding. We took our bedding upstairs, and the first thing we learned in the Army was how to make a military bunk. When you make a military bunk, your corners are 45 degrees angle. And when you put your blanket on your bed, you take a coin and you flip it, and it better bounce on that blanket. After that, we went out to the mess hall. This was our first day. And they got us in line. We went into the mess hall, and then we came back out, and they got us in a line across this big field, and they said, okay, now you're going to police the area, which means we picked up all the garbage, all the cigarette butts. Now, it was a pain for me because I didn't smoke and I hated cigarettes, but it was the Army, and you did what you were told. I have to say, the first morning was very interesting because we had some people who decided that at the morning they did not want to get out of bed. Well, the drill sergeant came over and gently awoken them by pushing their mattress off the bed. Now, that wasn't too bad for the bottom bunk, but the top bunk, that person had a little bit of a ride. You know, I have to tell you, when we were in the Army, they made sure that we dressed as soldiers. This is your gig line. Your line of your shirt and your pants had to be on line. You had to all your pockets had to be buttoned. And one of the worst things you could do in basic training was stick your hands in your pockets. If they could have sewed up our pockets, they would have done it for us, because that did not look military. So after we got out, they had us get information, and of course they checked us all to make sure we had all our gear that was strack, which means good. And then they marched us over to a track field. And you got to understand, we're wearing combat boots, we're wearing military fatigues, a fatigue jacket, and a baseball cap. And not a lot of us had done a lot of physical exercise before that. I had done some track, so I was a little bit better prepared than a lot of these young men. We then ran a mile. And running a mile in combat boots and formation is not the easiest thing in the world. When you do that, they give you little ditties that you sing, like, I want to be an airborne ranger, I want to live a life of danger, I want to go to Vietnam. And of course, most of us are saying, I don't want to go to Vietnam. But you said it because you were in the Army. Plus, it taught you how to put your feet properly so you didn't step on the person in front of you and cause everybody to fall down. As I said, we went to the chow line, to the mess hall after that for breakfast. And at that time, we didn't have our new serial numbers or our general orders, so we went through the first time. The next time you went through the chow line, you had to know your serial number, and you had to know your general orders. The general orders are the orders that the sentry is to follow when he's on duty to ensure that he does the proper things and defends his post. If you didn't know your serial number and you didn't know your general order, you went back to the back of the line. And so you got into the mess hall later. Well, you know, you're only given so much time to eat your chow. And if you didn't do it, you didn't finish, and you still had to go out. After that, we got information again being told how miserable we were and how we didn't deserve to be in the Army. And we went to PT, which is physical training. We went to do different exercises. We climbed bars, and they were doing something. They were making us physically strong for the things that we were going to go that was so physically demanding in basic training. You marched a lot, you ran a lot, you carried heavy equipment. You were constantly being corrected. When you were corrected, one of the best way to correct you is say, drop down and give me 20, which means you had to do 20 push-ups. You know what? You learned real quick that when they told you something, you listened to it and you remembered it. We went to a lot of classes while we were in basic training. We went to medical training, basically first aid. But the reason that they stressed that was because when you're in combat, sometimes men around you are going to get wounded. The medics aren't always there, or they might have got hurt. So you need to know how to do a dressing, how to stop bleeding, how to handle your buddy and help them so that when there is a medic, they can get him out. I forgot to tell you about when we got back from getting our bedding done. One of the things we had to do was shine our boots. Now, you're not going to believe this, but many of the men and women there had never shined a boot. They had lived at home with their moms and dads, and they didn't know anything about it. And they gave us, we had brass tags that we had to wear in our collars, similar to this, and on our hats and our belt buckle. We were told we had to shine those so you could see in them. Well, the first thing you had to do was take the lacquer off of it, which was no fun. And then you shined it. Another thing we were taught to do was clean up our barracks. And there's another thing. Many of the men and women who came there had never done any chores at home. So learning how to sweep a floor and mop a floor and handle one of those big buffers. And believe me, they're a challenge because they are strong. Or cleaning a urinal or cleaning a bathroom was never something they thought was going to cross their mind, but they learned how to do it. Because as our drill sergeants told us, cleanliness is next to godliness, and we like it that way in the Army. After our classes, we were issued our weapons. It was an M14. The M14's air-cooled, gas-operated, magazine-fed, and shoulder-fired. You had to remember that, too. And you had to learn how to care for your weapon. You learned to take your weapon apart, if you had to, blindfolded. Because if you're in combat and it's dark, you can't afford to light a light to be able to fix your weapon. And learn how to clean it, because a dirty weapon can jam and not fire on you. We then went to the firing range. I'd never fired a weapon before I got into the military. Unfortunately, I had to go 3 times to get my qualifications. And I found out on my last time why I had to go 3 times. M14 at the end has a sight that clicks up and down. My weapon had a dysfunctional function of every time I fired, it dropped a click. Not a real good thing if you're trying to hit a target. I finally found out that at the last time, which would have saved me 2 other times of going to the range. One other thing is, you learn to care for that weapon. One of the things you did was you didn't drop your weapon. If you did, that night, your weapon slept in a nice warm bunk and you slept on the floor. You learned, protect that. But there was a reason for that. If you get into combat, your weapon's your best friend. We also learned hand-to-hand combat. We were taught how to damage or kill another person with our hands, our feet, our head. Sometimes in combat, you'll run out of ammunition or your weapon will get broken and you'll still have to defend yourself. It's something that we learned, and believe me, there was a lot of bruises and things that happened that wasn't always a lot of fun, but they taught you how to defend yourself. They also taught us the spirit of the bayonet. The bayonet is a weapon that goes on the end of the rifle. It's a knife. You have to learn how to use it. It's like having a spear. The spirit of the bayonet, we were taught, is to learn how to damage someone or kill somebody with the bayonet. And the M14 is not a light weapon. When you hold it and you have to do bayonet training, it can get tiring, especially if you don't do it right the first couple of times, because they don't let you stop. But you realize, especially later, that they did it so that when you did get into a situation where you had to defend yourself, you could do it. About the 4th week, we started to feel a lot better about ourselves. We began to feel a little more like soldiers. We did a lot of marching. The drill we learned how to listen to orders and obey them. We felt more like soldiers. We dressed like soldiers. And we knew that this was going to be what we were going to have to do for 2 to 3 years or whenever we were going to serve. By the time we got to week 7, we felt good. The drill sergeants were talking to us like normal human beings, but we felt good about ourselves. We realized that we had grown up. One of the things the military does is it teaches you how to take care of yourself and take care of your buddy. It's one of the things that I learned that I'm glad to this day that I can deal with situations, sometimes because I fall back on my military training. We went out on night maneuvers, and one of the things they taught us was how to walk in the dark, using your hands and your feet in complete darkness to keep you from falling or tripping. As an old man, I'm still using those things today, believe me. One of the things we also had to do, we had to climb in night maneuvers, we climbed down in a squat and crawled under barbed wire through mud and sand while live machine gun bullets were going over our head. And in areas there, explosives were going off. And I can tell you something. When you're crawling under there and those bullets are whizzing over your head, you realize this is for real. And it was something that you were glad that you got done with. Well, we did our final march before we graduated. It was an overnight thing. We packed our canteens and took our rucksacks and took our mess kits, and that's what we ate with. It was two dishes clapped together with your knife, fork, and spoon inside, and also your pup tent and the rods. So we marched up the first hill, which in Fort Hood is called Agony, and it was. And that we started to go down the second hill, which is called Misery. And that night, and I forgot to tell you, it was raining. And if you've ever been under a poncho, it's just as wet under that thing as it is on top of it, because you're sweating all the time. So we went and pitched our tents up on a hillside. And the sergeant says, dig a trench around it, because with this rain, you don't want to get wet. It didn't help a lot. It's not fun sleeping in a wet sleeping bag. But, you know, you learn to deal with those things, because sometimes later on in life, it was going to be even tougher. One of the things we did also was kitchen police, KP. You know, as I said, most of the men that were with me had never done any chores at home. So it was interesting for them to have to do what they call dining room orderlies, who would take care of the outside tables and chairs and the floor. And there was also a person who did the dishes. Of course, they had machines, but you had to load them and get them off. And then there was the job that I always chose, and that was pots and pans. And the reason I chose pots and pans, because it was the dirtiest job. You know, all these pots came in with grease and that, but nobody messed around with you because they couldn't find a dirtier job for you to do. So I got through it. Our final challenge was our PT test. And it was challenging. You had to climb walls, you had to rappel, you had to take a rope and swing across a water-filled trench, and over and under many things. But the last thing was a large ladder built out of logs that was about a story and a half long. And as you climbed up it, it got wider and wider and wider. I got to the top, and I reached up, and the top pole was about 1.5 feet above my arm. I have to tell you, I have a fear of heights. I worked for a phone company, and every time I worked on a telephone pole, I got scared. And I'll tell you, I was scared that day. But if you didn't get over that, you didn't pass. And to this day, I don't know how I got over it, but I did. You know, when I have a guest on the show, I always ask them, how do you feel about being a vet? I'm proud to be a vet. We went through a lot. We learned to be comrades. We became brothers, so to speak. And we learned that we had to deal with situations and things that would keep us from getting hurt. And like I say, most vets are like me. They feel proud that they wore the uniform. Soon after that, we had graduation day. We marched in the parade and became soldiers. After that, we were given our new duty assignments. Basic was not easy. It was challenging for a reason. We had to be able to obey orders in combat without thinking, to make decisions on our own if the situation occurred. I'm proud to have completed basic training, and now I hope you have an idea of what our men and women in all branches went through to be able to defend you. Over the last 21 years, we have been sending care packages to our deployed troops. We have received many heartwarming letters from the troops we supported. I like sharing them with you. This one was from August 2017. Jim Kruse, I want to take a few minutes to sit down and thank you personally for all our support for our soldiers. The care packages you have sent are always a great encouragement to other men and women here. It is great to know that we have your support. Please know that your kindness impacts lives and have at our little FOB, which is for our operating base, as we continue to advise and train the Afghans so they can sustain the fight against terrorism and insurgency on their own. Thank you. God bless. Chaplain Rich Hartenberg, AP Lightning Chaplain. Before I end this show, I want to talk to you veterans out there. On January 28th, 2008, the Congress passed the Defense Authorization Act. It gives us the right to salute out of uniform, uncovered, to the flag as it raises, lowers, or passes by. It was amended in 2009 to salute the national anthem. The reason for this was to let people know who we veterans are. This is our right. Let them know who stood up and defended them. Just a note, I will be attending the honor flight on August 28th, a true honor. One of my later shows this year will talk about the honor flight and how other vets can attend. Thank you again for watching this show. I hope that has given you a greater understanding of what servicemen and women go through. I'll return next month with another guest who will share their experiences with you. I look forward to seeing you next month on PHTV. Honor and respect.